Kuzangpo, welcome to Bhutan e-learning program. I'm Topge. This is the biology lesson for Key Stage 5, classes 11 and 12. In today's session, we are going to look at the topic evolution. So at the end of this session today, you should be able to achieve the following objectives. So we will try to explain what is evolution, and we will also look at the different theories of evolution. I'm sure you would have wondered why there are different forms of life on the earth. We in fact know that there wasn't life on the earth some 3.5 billion years ago, and we also know that the life is believed to have originated from a single cell that was formed from chemicals. And today, if we look around us, we will find that there are diverse forms of plants and animals. But how did life take this journey from non-existent to existing in diverse forms? Today, if you listen to different people, you would hear many people talking about biodiversity. But how did we reach to this level? So this is something that we are going to learn in today's session through a discussion on evolution. So therefore, I would like to request all of you to pay full attention so that we will be able to develop better understanding of what evolution is. So if you look on the screen, you can see the animal. Can you see the animal? Can you please try identifying this animal? What is it? Okay, if you find it difficult, let me show the other animal. Next one. Okay, I have the next animal. So what does it look like? By now, you might know what this animal is. So this shows the journey taken by a deer-like animal which has evolved into the modern horse. In the same way, if I say, I and you were this person once upon a time, can you believe? These are some of the changes that has taken place over the period of time. And what we see today, the human beings around, has the ancestor here. So we evolved from this ancestor. So in a way, different forms of life has taken such steps through a process called evolution to attain to the level where we have reached. So if you look here on the screen, you can see how the evolution of a man has taken place. So now, as we look at evolution, let us try defining what is evolution. So what do you think would be evolution? Can you try defining the term evolution based on examples that I have shown to you? Okay, what is evolution? So evolution refers to the changes over a period of time. So the changes happening in organisms are gradual, orderly, which results in formation of a more organized organisms. These phenomena results in creation of more and more complex organisms which are better organized, which has better performance, and therefore the organisms ultimately become efficient. The doctrine of evolution has been studied by different people because this process itself is so fascinating that many people wanted to study the phenomena of evolution. And different people have proposed different ideas in the form of theories. But of different theories, there are 4 accepted theories about which we will be discussing in today's session. So the 4 theories of evolution that we will be discussing and which is widely accepted are: number 1, Lamarck's theory of inheritance. Number 2, Darwin's theory of natural selection. Number 3, Hugo de Vries' theory of mutation. And number 4, modern concept of evolution. So these are the 4 theories that we will be discussing in today's session. Pay full attention so that you will be able to understand what drives evolution, what has helped in taking us from our ancestor to this level. So let us first look at Lamarck's theory. Lamarck The full name is Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, a French biologist, and theory proposed by Lamarck, we call it as Lamarckism. So let us have a look at the evolution of an elephant. In the first picture here, you can see elephant with the short trunk feeding on the short grasses. In the second picture, you can see elephant feeding on much taller grasses, shrubs. And in the third picture, you can see two elephants with long trunk trying to feed on the tall tree. And in the fourth image, you can see all the elephants with long trunk. So based on the picture shown here, what conclusion can you draw from this picture? So the conclusion that you would be drawing from this picture are the ideas proposed by Lamarck, which resulted in formulation of a theory called Lamarckism. Can you think of the points? What points can you draw? Okay, so based on the picture that I have shown to you, there are four postulates put forward by Lamarck. Number one, we call it as new needs. Based on his idea, it is said that organisms evolve based on the requirement from the environment. Now here in the picture, as you have seen, in the earlier stage, when the food was available on the ground, it wasn't difficult for the elephants to feed on. As the grass exhausted on the ground, and therefore the elephants had to stretch their tongue in order to reach at least to the lowest branch of the tree so that it gets the food. So in that way, new need has come up, and therefore they had to use their trunk. So because of the use of the trunk, it resulted in optimum use of the trunk, thereby elongation happened. As a result, the elephants started having long trunk. Now, the third point is, based on Lamarckism, the organisms acquire new characters based on the pressure from environment. And in this context, the pressure is pressure exerted by the growing height of the tree on which the elephants had to feed. So therefore, because of such pressure, the trunk of the elephant over the generation had to be stretched. And these characters were acquired, and these characters passed on to the next generation. So that is called as the inheritance of acquired characters. As a result of such phenomena happening in the elephant, today, if you compare the kind of elephants that we see with the kind of elephants that existed before, you would find a drastic difference with short-trunked elephant and long-trunked elephant. So this tells us that these two species could be different, and it results in what we call it as speciation. So these are the four postulates put forward by Lamarck, and this theory we call it as Lamarckism. In summary, Lamarckism states that organism during its lifetime undergoes some changes in the organ and function of the organ based on the requirement from the environment, and these changes passes on to the offspring and it gets accumulated, and after many generations it results in creation of a new species. So that is about Lamarckism. Of course, it also has some drawback about which we won't be discussing for now. Okay, next, number 2, we will discuss about Darwinism. Darwinism is a theory proposed by an English naturalist, Charles Darwin, who took the voyage through the world to study the nature. While studying the nature, he had observed some differences between the organisms occupying different places, though the condition is same. And he had also seen some differences between the birds living on the mainland and the birds living on the island, though their ancestral were same. So let us now understand this theory again by relating it to the evolution of a modern elephant. So if you look here, you could see two elephants again feeding on the shrub. And then in another case, in the first picture, you could see one elephant has long trunk and the other one has short trunk. Now in the second picture, you could see both the elephants feeding on a tall tree. What difference can you see? I'm sure you might see that elephant with the long trunk can reach to the lowest branch of the tree, while the elephant with the short trunk cannot reach to the branches. Now in the third picture, what has happened? The elephant with the long trunk is still surviving, while the elephant with short trunk has died. Now in the fourth picture, what you could see is all the surviving elephants has a long trunk. So now based on this picture, what conclusions can you draw? Okay. So you might say that elephants with the long trunk has survived. So in the same manner, Darwin had proposed his theory based on the evolution of giraffe, about which you can explore on your own so that you will be able to understand better about the example that I have given here. So based on his finding, he had proposed at least 7 postulates. Number 1, he had said that species, the desire of any living organism is to let their generation continue, therefore they keep on reproducing. So reproducing results in overproduction. Let us take an example. Of course, you can see other examples in the textbook, but let us take an example of an apple, which all of you have seen it. In the apple, you will see many seeds. If all the seeds are sown, and then if it germinates and becomes a new tree, within few years you will find that whole of Bhutan will be filled with apple trees. In the same manner, in the orange you might have seen so many seeds. Each seed has the capability of becoming a new seedling and a mature plant. But if all these seeds grow up and become a mature plant, within few years you will find that almost all part of Bhutan will be filled with orange trees. But in reality that doesn't happen, because there is this reproduction happens in what we call it as geometric progression, meaning it multiplies, it keeps on multiplies. But on the other side, the point number 2 is the nature has limited space and food. So it is said that food multiplies grows in arithmetic progression, in the progression of adding. So therefore there is limited resources for newly produced offsprings or organisms to survive and live. As a result, they have to face what we call it as struggle for existence. So struggle for existence, because there are 3 types of competitions happening in the species. One we call it as intra-specific competition, the competition within the same species. The competition happening within the same species. And the reason is because the same species depend on same resources for their survival. Then that type of competition is the most dangerous one. So that is why the population is controlled. On the other side, there is also a competition between the species, which is called as interspecific competition. Third reason is the organisms will also have to withstand the pressure exerted by the environment, such as sometimes there can be storm, sometimes there can be drought, sometimes there can be famine, whereby animals will have to overcome all such pressures, and during the process those of the weak ones will die. So as a result, animals will have to show some adaptive features by being different. So being different in an organisms require them to have the variations. So the variations can be useful, sometimes it can be harmful, sometimes it doesn't show any result. If it is useful, it lets the animals to survive and propagate. But if it is harmful, it will let that individual to die. and this results in elimination. But if it is not harmful and if it is not helpful, but if it is just existing there without causing any result, then it may be passed to next generation, and such differences may continue to persist. So as a result, based on all these features, the nature does the selection. Now, who survives? Those of the organisms which has better adaptability advantage, which has better adaptability characters, will survive and continue to flourish. For example, if it is in the desert, a plant which has the capability of reducing the rate of transpiration with a very long root to move down deep into the soil to get the water will survive. So that will be selected by the nature, and that becomes the fit. While on the other side, those of the plants which transpires more with short root, which depends on water from the surface of the earth, will have to die, especially during the drought. So as a result of this, those of the organisms that are surviving will have better characteristics, and these characters will be inherited to the offsprings. And as more and more character gets accumulated in response to the harsh climatic conditions and different competitions, the organisms subsequently becomes different, and it results in the formation of a new species. So these are the 7 points put forward by Charles Darwin, and this we call it as Darwinism. The theory of Charles Darwin, natural selection. So now, in order to better understand the theory of Lamarckism and the theory of Charles Darwin, let us have a look at the video of a Yuck, which is found in Bhutan. So after having talked about the evolution and the theories of evolution, let us now try to link what we have already discussed. You know that these are the yucks, and yuck plays a very important role when it comes to income of the people living in a higher altitude. And maybe just to spell out some reasons behind why yucks are very important for the highlanders, is that we already know that in the high altitude the climatic conditions are very harsh. The growing seasons for the plant is very short, because of which highlanders find it very difficult to grow the required crops to fit, which cannot be done as it is done by the people living in the lowlands. So that is why they rear such animals, so that they can get the income. But how do we relate it to the evolution? From the evolution point of view, if you look at the animals over there, they have a very thick fur. So these thick fur would not have been there in their ancestors. If we had the opportunity of going back to their ancestors and checking in them, they would not have had all the features that are there in the yucks that you see behind me. So these characters developed and evolved over the period of time, because these animals had to survive in such places where the conditions are very harsh. During winter it is extremely cold. Now they will have to have the mechanism of keeping their body warm. But how do they do it? Can you please have a look at the animals over there? So what do you see in them? The most prominent thing, conspicuous thing that you could see in the yuck is they have a very thick fur. So how does it help? It helps in keeping their body warm during a very cold winter. So that is the adaptive advantage of the yucks that are found in such places at the altitude of around 3000 to 3500 meters, or maybe between 2500 to 3000 meters. So again, if you compare between the mother yuck, a matured yuck, and the calf over there, you could see passing off the character which is there in the mother to the calf. What you can see is the thick fur. But besides that, something that you do not see but that is there as adaptive advantage for the yuck is they have a broad hoof which is also very sharp. So these broad and sharp hoof of the yuck allows them to walk over a very steep slopes to find food. And the other feature that you do not see is they also have the adaptive feature of surviving in the places where the oxygen content is very low. You know that as we ascend, climb up, as the altitude increases, the atmospheric level decreases, therefore the oxygen content also decreases. So for these animals, they have the ability to survive in the place where the oxygen content is also low. And the other advantage that they have is they have a thick and rough tongue that allows them to graze the shrubs, the mosses and the rough trunks of a tree. Okay, I'm sure you might have got some information from survival of yuck at the higher altitude. Now in the second video, let us have a look at white-bellied heron, which is one of the critically endangered birds in the world, and let us see how the long neck, long limbs and light body of white-bellied heron has enabled it to survive in Bhutan.
Now we are here at Samdingka village under Punakha district. Behind me is a Pochu river, which is one of the prime habitat of one of the rare species of birds found in Bhutan, known as white-bellied heron. Just a moment ago, and still we are observing one of the white-bellied herons foraging in this river basin, and we would like to discuss further about how nature has selected this heron to survive in this kind of aquatic ecosystem, and different kinds of anthropogenic factors which has pushed this rare species onto the brink of extinction. The white-bellied heron depends on terrestrial and aquatic habitats. It depends on aquatic habitat for food and terrestrial habitat for nesting and roosting. When we talk about natural selection, it basically means the survival of the fittest. So here there are some common traits that we see in white-bellied heron which enables them to survive in such kind of habitats. They have long neck, sharp beak and long leg. On the contrary, as we move down this river, we come across numerous human threats which degrades this pristine habitat of the white-bellied heron. So in that way, it causes serious threat to survival of this white-bellied heron into the future. Okay, so from these two videos, you would have got some additional information that will help you to understand Lamarckism and Darwinism in a better ways. Let us now look at the third theory, that is the theory proposed by a Dutch botanist named Hugo de Vries, a theory of mutation. Let us again look at the example shown here about the elephant. In the first picture, you can see again elephant feeding on the shrubs. Both the elephant has with the short trunk. In the second case, you could see a mutation has taken place, and therefore one elephant has a short trunk and the other has a long trunk. Now in the third picture, you could see both the elephants trying to feed on the lowest branch of a tall tree, and here you could see an elephant with long trunk is able to reach to the lowest branch, while the elephant with the short trunk cannot reach for the branches. And in the fourth picture, you could see the elephant with the short trunk has died, while the elephant with the long trunk is surviving. And in the fifth picture, you could see all the elephants with long trunk. Now, what can you conclude from this picture? So, based on the theory proposed by Hugo de Vries, he had stated that the raw material for evolution is mutation, meaning mutation drives evolution in an organism. Mutation, in simple terms, refers to the sudden change in the sequence of DNA. Now, if you are confused, let us take an example of word God. God
the meaning is God, right? But again, if we insert another O in the word God, now it has changed to Good, good. So these two words gives you completely a different meaning. Now again, if you add another letter after God, that is S, now good becomes goods, and there is a huge difference between good and goods. In the same manner, if you add again another O in God, it doesn't make any sense. In the same manner, when the sequence of genes are arranged in the manner I have shown to you, it conveys a different meaning. So now, based on the theory of Hugo de Vries, organisms evolve because of mutations. Based on the idea of Hugo de Vries, the species are not formed by continuous variation, but it is formed by sudden mutation, sudden change in the genes. And he had stated that the characters resulted from mutations are heritable, meaning it can be passed on to the successive generations and persist there, thereby creating or forming new species. So he had done an experiment using an evening prime rose. The scientific name is Oinothera lamarckia. So this plant is a self-pollinating plant. So what he had done was he had tried self-pollinating these plants, and when the offsprings are produced, he found that majority of the offsprings are same, but few of the offsprings showed major difference. And those of the offspring showing major differences, again he self-pollinated. And again after the self-pollination, he found that the new offsprings, majority of the new offsprings were showing minor difference, but few of the offsprings are showing major difference. So he continued this process for 20 generations. And after 20 generations, he found a new form of plant which has come up from the same ancestor, that is evening prime rose. And that species had different flower position, different flower type, and different height of the plant. And that was completely different from the ancestral, the parent plant. And he had named it as Oinothera gigas. So now here he had said that such outcome has resulted due to mutation, and therefore he had proposed that mutation is the raw material or driving force for evolution. And it is also found that his ideas were applicable in some incidences, like in production of an acorn sheep, a short-legged sheep from the parents who were long-legged. And his theory also had some drawbacks, but we won't be discussing at this stage. Let us now look at the fourth theory. The fourth theory is known as modern concept of evolution. It is also known as modern synthesis theory. It is also known as neo-Darwinism. In fact, this theory is the reconciliation of Darwinism and Mendelian genetics. So this theory has two important points. Based on this theory, the evolution happens due to genetic variation and because of natural selection. Genetic variation, based on this theory, is brought about by four factors. One, mutation, as we have already discussed. When there is sudden change in the sequence of gene, the organisms tend to have a different character. Number two, recombination. Recombination happens basically when the crossing over takes place during meiosis 1 of the cell division. And number three, hybridization. Hybridization is the combination of the characters from two different species resulting in production of a new species. So that is hybridization. And genetic drift. Genetic drift, which we will be discussing in the next session, basically talks about distortion of the population because of some sort of diseases, natural calamities, or epidemic or pandemic like the COVID-19 that we are talking about these days. So in such a situation, what happens is some of the population will be eliminated because they die. As a result, the genes that they carry will be removed. So in that way, the genes will be lost from a gene pool or from a population. Now, the point number 2 is natural selection. Natural selection based on Darwinism is the survival of fittest. Those of the fit ones will be surviving. Nature is going to select that. But in the modern synthetic theory, it is based on the idea that nature will be selecting those of the organisms which has higher capability of reproducing and letting the offspring to survive and continue propagating or producing the offsprings in the generations to come. So basically, in this part, in the modern synthetic theory, natural selection refers to differential reproduction. We know that not all the organisms will be able to produce the offsprings equally. Even if they produce the offsprings as they desire, not all the offsprings will be able to survive. So, those of the offsprings which has the capability to survive will adapt to the changing environment and become adapted, and those of the adapted organisms will now start producing the offsprings which also has the capability to respond to the climatic conditions. So these are the 4 theories of evolution which are widely accepted, but of all the 4 theories, the last one, modern concept of evolution or synthetic theory, is the widely accepted and most recent one. So let us now look at the summary of the lesson that we have discussed today. So in the first part, we have talked about evolution, wherein we said that evolution is a continuous, gradual and orderly changes in the organism which creates more complex organisms which has orderly structures and which are very efficient. After that, we looked at the 4 theories that better explains the process of evolution or phenomena of evolution. So number 1 was Lamarckism, which basically talks about the inheritance of acquired characters to the offsprings. Then number 2, we talked about Darwin's theory, which basically talks about natural selection. And after that, we talked about Hugo de Vere's theory of mutation, wherein he said that evolution happens due to mutation in the genes. And the 4th one, we talked about modern concept of evolution, which is the combination of Darwinism and Mendelian genetics, wherein they had said that the evolution happens due to genetic variation and then natural selection. So with this, we come to the end of the discussion on evolution. I'm sure you would have understood or got a better picture of what evolution is. So before we end the session, let me give you a few questions for you to work on. There are 3 questions on which you will work. So question number 1, natural selection is only the means of evolution. What is your view? Number 2, how would you explain the evolution of yucks based on Darwinism? Number 3, discuss the impact of evolution on biodiversity. So these are the 3 questions on which you will work, and then you may discuss with your subject teachers. With this, we come to the end, and I would like to thank you for attending this session, and I look forward to having you in my next session. Until then, take care, stay safe. Thank you.